G'day guys, Solid here. Welcome back to another video. I'm sitting in the garage, so that means it's viewer questions and comments. If you're new here and you're not familiar with the format, I basically grab my trusty little iPad, I pick my favorite viewer comments and questions and basically just kind of shoot from the hip. This is nothing scripted. I just give my honest and instant response to the best questions and comments of the month. So let's jump straight into it. So the first question is from MHH and he's asking me, which would I prefer, a Yamaha T700 or a WR250R to travel the world? No questions at all. For me personally, it'd be the WR250R. For one, it suits my kind of riding. I would want to do a lot more off the beaten path stuff than I would do riding on the highways and that kind of thing. So I really would like to get my teeth into some off-road riding in as many countries as I could. And the WR250R is a lot easier to pick up than the T700. I can pick up the T700, but once you load it with gear, it's not going to be a lot of fun off-road, at least in my opinion. The other thing to consider is a lot of countries prefer the smaller bikes. So I think the Yamaha WR250R, just getting parts is going to be easier in a lot of the smaller countries. I'm thinking South America, a lot of Asia. Traveling with a little WR250R does have its benefits for that kind of style of riding, and it can still handle the freeway speeds if you have to. So that's my bike of choice. Of course, the T700, I wouldn't be unhappy to take that either. It's a very capable bike, but it does have a few compromises that I think that the WR250R doesn't. That's weight, availability of parts, and just being able to squeeze that thing through traffic in a lot of the high density population areas throughout the world. So those are my shotgun thoughts on which bike I'd prefer to go around the world. The next question is from Ian and he's asking me, why wouldn't you just buy a Husqvarna 701 at the same weight but more than double the horsepower? I think he's referring to the CRF300L video that I posted up recently. Well, I can think of a few answers there, mate. Power isn't everything. Certainly with the 701, you'd be struggling to use all that power off-road in my experience, having ridden with a lot of 690s in my time. The other thing to consider is money. Those 701s are not cheap, mate. You could buy 3 CRF300Ls for the price of one Husqvarna 701. So there's that to consider. There's also the availability in your country, whether you can actually get your hands on a Husqvarna or a KTM. So that's another thing to account for. And the weight's a little misleading. The CRF300L comes in roughly 139 kilos. Let's say it's the low 140s with fuel, whereas the Husqvarna 701 actually is in the mid 150s once you chuck fuel in it. I believe it's about 158 kilos. So that's a massive weight difference, mate. We're looking at over 10 kilos there. So it certainly isn't a similar weight. Sure, there's a more power. Power and ego isn't everything in a motorcycle, I think. So I think a lot of people are actually looking forward to this CRF300L as it's basically an incremental improvement on the 250L. And I'm very excited for one to see it. Not saying the 701 isn't an amazing bike. I just think it's a little too heavy and a little too powerful for real single track kind of work. So that's why people might buy it. Sticking with the 300 video, Alan is asking, why wouldn't you buy a CRF300L over a CRF300L? Well, I can think of a few reasons, mate. The first one is price. The CRF450L is significantly more expensive than the 300L. You also might not need that amount of performance. The 450L makes substantially more power. It also has a lot stiffer suspension. I can also think of some more reasons. The ECU is pretty piss poor when it comes to fuel management. Even with the update with the RL, there's still whisperings that they haven't sorted that fuel issue, that the flywheel is just a little too light. And we've also got those service intervals. The CRF250L and the 300L will have significantly longer service intervals. So some people just don't like doing maintenance all the time. So that's another big factor. Another reason is currently here in Australia, we can't buy the CRF450L. It's actually been discontinued here, so we can't buy that bike at all. So that's another thing to consider, is whether the bike is available in your country. So to surmise, that is price, performance. Not everyone wants high-end performance, service intervals, and basically cost of ownership. The CRF300L would be much cheaper to run and look after, in my opinion, than the 450L. So those are some reasons why you wouldn't. The next comment is from Dank Dualsport, and he's saying, who's disliking this man's vlog? Wasters. Completely agree, mate. Great comment. The next question is from Gorn, and he is saying that the key question about the CRF300L is how it will be after some modifications like exhaust, air filter, fuel controller, and a bit of weight savings. And I completely agree, mate. The tantalizing thing for me with the 300L is not what it's going to be like straight off the factory floor. It will be what it's like once you modify it, as I expect it, like most dual sports, to come out fairly compromised from the factory. We know that Honda usually skimp on the suspension on these little dual sports, having ridden the 250L extensively. I know that the suspension is quite underwhelming for anyone with a seasoned amount of riding experience off-road. It's fine for beginners, but if you're wanting to push it a bit, it certainly is undersprung. So I'll be very interested to see, once you get a full pipe on there and drop some weight, maybe put in a lithium battery as well, redo the suspension, you could really be doing with quite a little dual sport weapon. So that's what I'm excited for, and I'm definitely keeping my eye on this CRF300L for my potential next dual sport. The next question is from BedMac2, and it's a long one, so I'm basically going to summarize it here. And he's saying, it's funny how much my thinking about buying a new bike is clogged by what might be around the corner. And he's saying things like the 390 Enduro R possibility, maybe Suzuki updating the DRZ400, the KTM 490 around the corner, the KLX300, the CRF300L, or maybe coming out in the Western markets. And while we're waiting for all these, the WR250R has just been discontinued. And I completely agree with this sentiment, mate. It is a bit frustrating at the moment. I know a lot of people will say, oh, just get out there and buy a bike and ride it rather than sit and wait on the fence. And that's usually my answer, is to buy the bikes that are available on the market. However, at least here in Australia, I can't speak for other markets. Here right now in Australia, off-road vehicles, whether it be utes, four-wheel drives, dirt bikes, or dual sports, are holding a real premium in the second-hand market. They're about 30% more expensive than they were in 2019. And you're basically almost paying new prices for a second-hand bike. So to me, it just does not make sense to buy a second-hand dual sport at the moment. I just keep looking at the market and scratching my head, wondering when it's going to turn back into reality price-wise. So the cost-benefit ratio really isn't there for the second-hand market, but it is very frustrating, and time goes so slowly when you have the money in the account, you have your mates already riding off-road and asking when your bike will be ready and when you'll be joining them, and you just want to get out there. But the smart decision, at least for me personally, is to wait a little bit longer, see what happens with the market, and hopefully snap up a brand new bike that is far more tailored to what I've been wanting. I know it's frustrating, but patience is a virtue, mate, so it might pay off in the long run. So the next question is from Coleman. He's wanting to know about the viability of turning a WR250X into a WR250R. It's quite an easy thing, mate. You just get the wheels off a WR250R, that is the 18 and the 21, chuck them on the X, and you're pretty much good to go with a few other little tweaks. The one benefit as well, other than the downside of the cost of having to get the wheels and putting them on the X, is that you will have better brakes, as the X does have a bigger caliper than the R, so that's a plus there too, mate. But other than that, they make as good a dual sport off-road as the WR250R in my eyes. So the next question is also from Coleman. He said, "Solid, love your t-shirt. Did you borrow it from Laurel and Hardy?" Well, it's clear that you've never seen an episode of Laurel and Hardy, mate, because they always wore suits and they always looked quite dapper, if you ask me. And well, I'm going to wear what I'm going to wear, and you can just suck it. The next comment was one that is really high value, and it's a great summation of how the power characteristics might compare towards the CRF300L and the KLX300. And it's from Godfrey here, and he's saying that although my estimate of how the power characteristics should turn out was pretty on point based on the 250s that we have, that is that the Honda is currently the more revvy engine and the KLX is better off the bottom end. At least that was my in the seat experience, having ridden both of them. this won't actually be the case for the 300s, because it's actually the Honda that will have the better bottom end performance and the KLX that will be more revvy. He says this because the Honda is actually going to be stroked, whereas the KLX is going to be bored out. The KLX also has the higher compression ratio, which suggests that's probably going to be the more revvy of the two. So I got that wrong, and that's a great level of insight there, mate. So that's definitely at least helped my thinking on which one of these two to prioritize, as I like torque more. So it looks like the Honda might be the one that I might go with, depending on how I find the test rides and should they release them here in Australia. So thanks for that contribution, mate. That was really illuminating, and hopefully that'll help some others trying to decide as well. 950 Boy's got the next question. He's asking me, Solid, is that an original Game Boy in the background of your adventure news videos? And the answer is yes, indeed. So I bought this thing brand new in 1994. It took me over a year to save for the damn thing, as I was only 9 at the time, and my favorite game was Kirby's Dream Land. And yes, it does still work. So the final question is one I'm getting a lot, and that's, what will my next dual sport be? And my decision-making process has changed along with the times. As we know, 2020 has been an absolute dumpster fire, and my decision-making process has been changed to accommodate these crazy times. I was looking for a second-hand dual sport. I'm no longer doing that. The second-hand market is just so overpriced. We've got that COVID tax, as me and my mates are calling it. Basically, the off-road market here in Australia has just skyrocketed. I've decided just not to fall into that trap. I'm not wasting my money on something that will be a couple of $1,000s cheaper next year. So that's shifted me over to the new bike market, as that seems like the better cost-benefit ratio, at least at the moment. The second reason for that is that we could possibly have the CRF300L and the KLX300 coming to Australia early next year. I haven't reached any confirmation, but I've had more than 4 people confirm that their dealers have said they can order them. I just haven't had any physical, factual confirmation yet, so I don't want to scream it from the heavens. But if that's the case, then it'll either be the 300L or the 300 from Kawasaki that will likely be my next bike. Of course, there's a test ride to see whether they will really suit me, and the price point will obviously be very important, but that's probably the way I'm going to go, at least with the moment, and with no significant changes in the next couple of months. But waiting for that announcement is absolutely killing me. I just want to get out there on the trails. Hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next couple of months you'll see a shiny dual sport in my garage. So those are all the viewer questions I've got for this month. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you haven't already, and a big welcome to all the new subscribers over the last couple of months. There's over 1,000 of you lately, so that's craziness. Welcome to my weird little part of the internet where we love all things dual sport. And until the next video, guys, don't forget to stay shiny side up, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later.